not very often that we get a Nobel laureate to speak to us. But Dr. Othman, thanks very much for joining us. Just this business of the transformation that we could see as far as medicine is concerned, riding on the back of AI, personalized medicine, breakthroughs in cancer. How confident and optimistic do you realistically feel today?
2.5 out of 5.
That's not a lot.
No, actually, I was listening to this very interesting conversation and trying to relate it to the sphere that I know something about. Probably the singular event, for the public, it was ChatGPT, et cetera. For life scientists, the singular event was the development of AlphaFold, which may be less known to some of the people in this room because you're not mostly life scientists, but it's been transformational to biology and to medicine. And what AlphaFold, which was invented by Google DeepMind, so and what it is essentially an LLM generative type of AI, and what it's being fed, the data that it's trained on are the structures of the many thousands of proteins that are the agents of chemical activity in the living cell. And the outcome of that is that AlphaFold has succeeded for the first time. This is already several years ago. And as you're saying, there are iterations that have come out since. But dramatically sort of landed at our shores by predicting quite accurately, with stunning accuracy actually, the three-dimensional structure of proteins on a genomic scale. So what that means is that if you have a new gene that you're suddenly interested in, that maybe the three-dimensional arrangement of atoms is not known, this software or program can essentially predict that structure very accurately. And that turns out to be a profound enabler of discovery, both in basic science laboratories and in industrial settings. So it's really transformational. But what I think is even more transformational is the concept that it introduces. Because if you look under the cover of AlphaFold, actually, I don't think people really understand exactly how it works. I mean, of course, the engineers that designed it know how they made it, okay? They know what they trained it with, and they came up with some innovative ways to do the training that in part make this possible. But at the end of the day, if they really don't know the details of how it works, okay? They've created kind of a brain, and, it's not a human brain, but they're starting to dissect it and try to figure out exactly how it works. So, but what it teaches us is that maybe in biology and medicine, and also in pharmaceutical discovery, we don't need to understand everything about how the body works to be able to productively control how the body works. That is a revolutionary concept because, probably more than any other factor, what adds to the cost and time and the very high failure rate in drug discovery, it's the fact that we have to discover the basic biology in medicine as we're doing the development, right? And so when you're trying to do two things at the same time and neither one has a formula, that's really difficult.
It is. Okay. It is difficult.
So maybe it won't be so necessary. So it's a bit of an inspiration in a way to me.
It certainly is a great thought that you've put on the table. So let me take that back to the panel. And Balan, we talked about the concept of AI in the context of what it can do as far as commercialization, drug discovery, et cetera, is concerned. Where else do you see it in its current stage being an accelerant, being an enabler?
Well,
which sectors, which industries?
Gosh, I'm almost hesitant because artificial intelligence is such a broad landscape, to be completely truthful. And there are very, very many disciplines in which narrowly tailored artificial intelligence with the compute power we have and the way the neural networks work, that there's this kind of intrinsic learning that in narrow applications, as in health and potentially in, you could imagine in the legal profession, you could train an LLM just on the legal documents and have kind of a sense of understanding, accelerated understanding. I think where we are now, still very exciting. And this is something I just wanted to mention on the software side. We've got some brilliant leaders here on the hardware side. I can just tell you on the software side and application development side, what I was hinting at in this human and machine team that I think will govern successes in the next dozen or so years, I think hinges on entrepreneurs in India and America thinking about building trust and the understanding of what, to the extent that we can understand, the extent that we can build these experiences that humans can build trust in what's happening with the data and how the data is being used, and the extent that we can understand and explain, so that we have, when there are real life and death consequences or values intention, or medical is a great example where there are very significant consequences to our ability to use these systems to empower a doctor to make a more comprehensive diagnosis or to personalize medicine. I think this issue of trust is something that has to be thought about from the beginning of the software's development. How can we make transparent what is possible to make transparent? How can we show the data that it's been trained on? How can we show the relevance of the patterns that we know existed in the anomalies? So I think we all have to have responsibility for the technologies we now are starting to develop, and the aspects of the data that we're using to train these different models, and the patterns that we're discovering. So for me, I think there will be some really wonderful advances in the knowledge economy in several areas, but in areas where there are very challenging and kind of enduring challenges that all humankind are facing, we're going to have to work together to learn the power of this data. And I think there's kind of a new respect coming to the way that we collect, what we collect, just as we all have a feeling about our own personal data. I think in a broader sense, we have to have an understanding of what specific areas can we marry up human and machine decision-making and understanding to get to the best possible overall outcome. That's how I would think about it.
You know, so, and that's interesting that you talk about trust and transparency, and because that is going to be the currency as we move forward in this AI world. And now, how do you hard code it from a developer's perspective, from a software manufacturer's perspective, and from a government's perspective? Because that's the complexity of this challenge today, where governments are, there is no clarity yet on what you should regulate and how you should regulate it.
Yeah. Well, look at I think. And again, I like sort of comparing it. History is a great teacher in a lot of these sort of challenges.
Yes, we need to backcast as much as we forecast.
It's like, the famous Yogi Berra thing. The past is very much easier to predict than the future, right? So, I think the issue is that when you think about the communication industry, we have the same problems. When it roll back the clock to 2G, 3G, 4G. Countries didn't have a really unified mechanism to enable cell phone users to go roam in different geographies. They didn't have a unified policy for spectrum allocation. And the UN and ITU and organizations like 3GPP and 3GPP2 and others came together to come up with a sort of a roadmap for how you and I, when we go from here to India.
But we're also living in a fractured geopolitical world where multilateralism is clearly on the retreat.
Which is what I was going to say. In this case, there are a certain set of issues that are underlying technology issues. And then there are certain issues that are more application-centric issues and data-centric issues. So the notion that you could have a set of large companies as hyperscalers aggregating your data in Seattle or in Mountain View, I think that is questionable in the future, because every sovereign is going to want to keep its data within its borders. And so it comes back to what Balan said. You have to be thinking about what is the trust quotient that you're going to embed in the services and applications, because the consumers are not going to know the difference. I mean, see what's happening with TikTok. TikTok becomes the most prolific application in the U.S. And national actors are clearly taking advantage of it, and understandably, Washington is concerned about it. So you can multiply TikTok times 10 for some of the problems we're going to have. So I think the world is going to change with sovereign controlled applications and services in terms of how these things develop, how these things are used. So I think that's the new set of issues. And it's going to take time. We're going to make mistakes. And, some good things are going to happen. A lot of companies are going to fail in that process.